Good evening. I'm Dr. Jeff Hale, and with me tonight is Dr. Renee Hale, and we are Spirit Consulting Group Incorporated. We welcome you to our Google Hangout tonight, where we'll be talking about how great decisions get made. This is the second part of a two-part series. Last week we talked about how great decisions get made. We are using Don Maruska's book and 10 easy steps to reaching agreement on even the toughest issues. And last week we went in depth in steps 1 through 5. And tonight we're going to go in depth with steps 6 through 10. But let's start with just a brief review of what steps 1 through 5 are. Renee, would you like to start us off with step 1?
Sure. Step 1 is all about involving everyone. So what that means is pull in the people that are affected by this decision. Pull in the people that might even have something to say about it from a peripheral perspective. You want to pull in everyone that you can think of that might have something to do with the decision that you're about to make, because you'll always have a chance down the line for those who really realize they're not a major part of it to bow out. That kind of thing usually isn't a problem. But if you don't invite enough people or the right people, or you miss someone, now that could really be a problem. So make sure that you involve everyone that could possibly have a reason to be connected to this issue. And I think if you do that, you're going to be in good shape.
Good. And step 2 is discover your shared hopes. And a good way to do this is just to give people a stack of paper and ask them to write one hope per page. Give them about 3 minutes to do that, and then go around the group and ask them to share their hopes. And what we've discovered when we do this is that groups tend to find that they have a whole lot of common ground, a lot of hopes that they share together for the outcome of the decision-making process that they're engaging in. Which leads us to step 3.
Step 3 is uncovering the real issue. So at this point, you're going to let everybody have a stab at how they feel about this issue coming into it. And as everyone gives their input, it might become clear that really the issue is a little bit deeper than what you thought, or it might not even be what you thought. Maybe you're naming some symptoms of the issue and the problem, and not really getting to the root of it. So letting everybody have a chance to really express their thoughts, and then the person next to them gets a chance to actually summarize what that first person said. You can just kind of go around the room and do that. Let everybody have a chance to say something about that issue coming into it fresh, and then see if people are hearing each other well and what people are saying and what surfaces from that particular sharing time.
Yes, and as you do that, you want to allow the person to speak without interruption from their colleagues. The people who aren't speaking should just be listening and taking notes on what's being said. This is not the time to comment or to debate what's being said about the issue at hand. Right. And we continue that kind of process with, once we've really aired what we think the issues are and uncovered what the real issue is for us to be working on right now. And by the way, Maruska makes a very interesting point to why that process is important. He says that teams typically miss the real issue about 50% of the time. So they end up working on things that aren't really the problem. So that's why it's important to really identify that right up front. Make sure you spend the time to do that. And once you have, then we start that process again, going around the room one by one and saying, okay, if this is the real issue, what might be a viable option to dealing with that issue? And everyone goes around, or we go around to everyone, and everyone gets to speak uninterrupted and offer one solution to that issue without interruption, without commentary. Again, this is not the time to evaluate. It's the time to listen and to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Which takes us to step 5.
Right. When you do have some of these options out and you've identified them, then you want to gather the right information that will help you explore those options further. As Jeff mentioned earlier today on our radio show, this information that you're gathering, it's not exhaustive. There's no way you could spend years researching any one thing, but it's to get the kind of information that you need to make a good, informed, and a decision that will really help everybody. So what you're looking for is information about those options from varied sources. So let's just say that you had a financial decision on the table, right? And you guys are going to discuss that. Well, you might put together a committee to go search out some information on some possible options. Make sure you put people in that group that aren't finance people. It gives another perspective on gathering the information and such. So anyway, the gathering the information part is about getting all the information you need to make informed decisions about the options that you've already chosen.
That's right. And so that really brings us to the end of our summary, and I can imagine what some people are saying, wow, isn't that going to take too much time? So Renee, how would you respond to that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, there are ways to pursue this and facilitate it so that it is not a vastly time-consuming project. But the other part of it is you have to be willing to take some time to diligently approach what's coming down the line towards you that you have to make the decision for. How many times have you heard someone say, well, I have to go into work today and put out some fires. Oh, I got to go deal with that today. Why does anyone have to deal with anything? Most of the time, it's because either they or someone else made a decision about something and the outcome then wasn't really good. And so you have to go in there and, quote, clean it up. Well, if you take the time in the beginning, lay the right foundation for the decision making, and then have that decision made in an orderly way that is a process that truly brings you to a good decision, you'll have less problems later and less likelihood of having something unpleasant happen because of that decision. You're just basically watching out for yourself and others in your company when you take the time to go through a process to make a decision that's well informed.
That's right.
So obviously I'm a fan of spending some time on the decision making.
Well, at the end of the day, it's going to save time in the long run. And not only time, but money.
Right.
So let's go ahead then and start in depth on our last 5 steps that we're going to discover tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Okay. Did I see something pop up about a chat question?
It was a comment from me to you.
Oh, well, I didn't see that because I'm not actually seeing that part of the screen.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you.
Oh, I see it now. Never mind, I got it.
All right.
I'm fully integrating now into the Google Hangout world, people, so yes.
All right, we're good. All right, let's talk about step number 6. Once we've gathered the information, then it's time to get everything on the table. Now, it's important to remember that when we're gathering information, we're gathering information about how our options actually support our shared hopes. So that's the kind of information we're looking for. We want to know if the options we're actually considering are going to take us where we want to go. And in step 6, by putting everything on the table, we mean we're going to put uh, the negatives and the positives on the table. This is not about trying to sway opinion like it often occurs in decision making. You know, you've been in a group and people try and power their way through by just focusing only on the positives of one particular option. And then they try and get people to come to agreement around that point of view. But in step 6, we're going to give all of our options the chance to be considered, both from a positive point of view and a negative point of view, so that we try and get everything on the table about the options that are before us. So we'll be using our shared hopes as the basis for these options. As we talk about these things, what we want to discover more fully is, do these options take us to where we have said that we hope to be, what we want to achieve? And we begin with the status quo option. In other words, what happens if we just stay the way we are? Now, the reason that is important is because the status quo becomes our benchmark. This is what we know. This is where we are, and then we can imagine from that point what change might look like. But unless you really consider the status quo as an option, then you don't have a steady point in time and space to relate your other options to. So we begin with the status quo option, and we start with one person sharing their point of view of why staying at the status quo would not be a good thing. And then you move around the whole group, each person stating one reason why they think staying at the status quo would not be good for the organization or for the group.
Let me ask you a question right there. Now, normally if you're already in a decision-making process with a group, doesn't it stand to reason that you've kind of already decided that the status quo isn't good? Are you kind of just restating some of the obvious here?
Yeah, I think in some ways you're restating the obvious. You are sensing the need to move on from where you are, probably. At the same time, I am not one of those persons who think that making a decision for the sake of a decision is better than making no decision at all, or making no movement at all, because sometimes the status quo is better than a poor option, and until you fully explore the status quo, maybe there are things about the status quo you haven't really considered up to this point.
Right. Maybe there are just certain things that have made you feel bad about it, but really have you considered it in its fullness? Maybe it's not all bad. Maybe it doesn't require a complete, 100%, 360 turn overhaul kind of thing.
Yeah, it really makes you think through your current reality more realistically, considering all the possible negatives of staying there and the possible positives of staying there. And then you have something, again, a benchmark to relate um, other possible alternatives because you fully defined what your reality is. Does that
Yep,
make sense?
that makes sense.
And again, what we want to do while we're going through this is to instruct everyone to listen to what others are saying without questioning or debating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just take in the information at this point. So once we've done that with the negative, then we go around and we do the same thing with the positive, as I mentioned earlier. And then we take, once we finished with the status quo, let's say we have 4 or 5 other 6 options or so that we are considering, we repeat that process with each of those options. So that would take us on to step number 7. And Renee, if you don't have anything to add to 6, we'll go on to that. But if you want to say something more about step 6, feel free to.
No, I like number 6. I like getting everything on the table. I think it's awesome. Well, it's one of my favorite. They're all my favorite, so I like that. But yeah, we can go right on to 7, which is where we're actually going to begin to record or write down choices that support your hopes. So if we want to just wait for that slide to come up, do you have that up?
Yeah, there it is.
All right. So what we're going to do now is talk about confirming in writing all of the things the choices that support the shared values. So the things that that you have reviewed, we're going to review the hopes that we've done as a group, and then we're going to allow a few minutes of silence for each person to reflect on the options and how those options relate to the group's hopes. So you're going to give some silent time here. Sometimes silence, I think, is alarming for people. We're just not used to it. We're used to fast-paced meetings. We're used to a fast-paced life. We rarely take time to think about things in silence, but this is one of those moments where people might even walk out and say, wow, it's been a long time since I've had a chance to really think about something that carefully on my own. So you're going to review your shared hopes, and then you're going to allow, if you're the one facilitating this, a few minutes for each person to reflect on the options and how they relate to the group's hopes. And then you're going to ask each person to write down the option that best fulfills the hopes of the group. So they're going to have a piece of paper. It's going to be a secret thing so that at this point they feel absolute freedom to express their top choice, what they really feel is the best. They're going to write that down and they're going to circle it. And that just shows this is what I think would be the best. And then you can also underneath that go ahead and list some other options that would be acceptable to you on that little piece of paper. And if you're part of the group and you've been designated as the facilitator to stand up, write things down, collect the papers, lead the group, you're part of that group too, and you get a little secret ballot too. So everybody's going to write all of that down. They're going to write what their top choice is, they're going to circle it, and they're going to write a couple of others on the paper that they think these could be viable options. They're not my top choice, but they could be viable. And what this does is it gives people, again, that chance to express themselves, how they really feel without any sort of fear or apprehension about what someone else might think when they review themselves out loud and in front of the whole group. So that's really what it is when you write down the choices that support shared hopes. It's that point in the process where you do get to be totally you in an anonymous way. Jeff?
Very good. And so then we're going to go on to step 8, which is mapping solutions. So what we want to do here is tabulate the results, and you'll see on your screen what Don Maruska calls a solution finder. And what you do is you list all your options, and then you record. Okay, which option was the first choice? If it was option A, then you'll put a tick mark for every vote for option A as the first choice, and option B, C, or D, etc., like that. And then you'll list, okay, well, how many people voted for option A as an acceptable alternative, and how many people voted for option B as an acceptable alternative, and keep going like that. And then you can total them up, and you'll see really what the group thinks about the options that are available to them. And typically, often I should say, there really is a clear first choice that the group has identified. But if it's not a real clear first choice, then you want to look at how the alternatives weight out. I mean, how many, if you take, for example, option C, maybe option C, when you put together how many people voted for it as a first choice, or a second, or third, or fourth choice, that will add some weight that might actually, even though it wasn't most people's first choice, most everyone was gravitating around C. They saw value in C. So you might want to go back to that and re-look at that again, because of the weight of the number of people who were looking at that as an acceptable alternative, even if it wasn't their first choice, might raise that option to the level of being the group's first choice. Renee, would you have anything to say about that?
Well, I think it's interesting because you're not really looking for consensus by asking people to raise their hands around the table. At
Right.
this point, everyone's had a chance to put in their 2 cents in front of everyone, and you've taken the vote, so to speak, on the secret ballots, and now you're tabulating the results. I think if people were, I don't know, honest and open in the sharing part when others were listening and watching, probably now the vote is not going to be a big surprise what comes up on top at all. But all of this to say that it's not a set in stone rigid process. It's very dynamic. So even at this point, after considering everything, it could be that this is the first time that there might be an alternative solution that even pops up because of what people have thought of after having reviewed all of this. So you don't want to be so rule bound by placing things on charts and counting numbers that you rule out real thinking processes that may emerge
Right.
during this. So if that happens, then it's necessary to go back and make sure that whatever comes up, that you do put it through its paces, making sure that it's serving the hopes of the group for the outcome of this decision and so forth all the way through. You want to put any solution that comes out at any point through its paces, its filters, so that what finally ends up on the chart as kind of outweighing all the others is actually a solution that does fit the criteria. Hey, everybody agrees this one fits the bill better than any of the others.
Right. And Maruska talks about the possibility of looking at incorporating the attributes of several different favored solutions into one solution. So let's say you get a fairly equal um, uh, a fairly equal number of people with first choices around option B and option C. Well, how might you look at combining attributes of option B and option C to even make a more acceptable solution?
Right. I think that's really important too.
Yeah. And then after you've considered all of this, then um, you still want to keep on pressing the question, is there an alternative solution that the group can support? I mean, what I mean by that is if you've come to a decision on the first choice, what's your alternative solution also that the group will be able to say, well, if the first choice doesn't work out the way we really wanted it to, what would be the next solution that we would go to? And that really brings us to
That's right.
step number 9.
It leads right into this, which is looking ahead and being prepared with alternatives. Have you ever known someone that thought if they made a decision about something and set something in motion, then they could just walk away and leave it because they have, quote, arrived? And if you ever feel that you have arrived, you'll be in trouble, because we all know that change happens and things happen daily that we don't expect. And sometimes big things can happen after you make a business decision that you have no control over and you didn't know it was coming. But if you are well prepared through this process with A, B, C, and then we could even talk about contingency planning as part of it as well. If you are prepared with alternatives, you'll be prepared to change direction quickly. And that's what you need to be. In the world we're in now, especially in the business world, the economics that we're living with these days, when things change rapidly, if you can't quickly adjust, you may lose revenue because you might lose out on the next direction of product development or services offered, what people actually need now, if you don't keep up with things as they change. So what we want to do is we want to be prepared as individuals and as companies. Be prepared to alter things in your decision as you go. You need to encourage this next step, active inquiry about the progress implementing the decision and its outcomes. That means at every step of the way, you want to encourage people to be evaluating and asking questions. Is this still the right way? Are we still doing it this way? Has anything caused us to need to change the way we approach this part of what we're doing? So you need to be constantly doing that. Now, one thing, let me just say this about step 9, Jeff. Something that many large companies have in their departments are people that are solely hired and put in place for scanning. They scan, and they scan everything from newspapers and social media to the local businesses, and they keep track of business climate and trading and just everything you can imagine that goes into conducting a business. They will be scanners, and that's all they do all day. They gather the information, and they're looking for trends, and they're looking for things that they know could affect, and they will give reports on a daily basis to decision makers that are inevitably in spots that are crucial to the viability of the company. So scanning is very, very important to keeping that information flow going, and then being able to understand when and why you need to possibly make changes to direction and implementation details.
Well, let me interrupt here because you've you've used the concept of scanning
Yeah,
and you've paired it with large companies. But let's
right.
say you know, I'm a small company. It's me and
Mm-hmm.
3 employees or whatever. How does scanning apply to me, and how would I possibly do that?
All right. Yeah, I said that because I think I wanted to make the point that a scanner, a position of being a scanner, can actually be a bona fide paid full-time position. That being said, that's how important even large companies know that scanning is. So it's important on any level, whether you're a sole proprietor or whether you're a large company. Just know that and you shouldn't feel guilty about the fact that you can't spend more time scanning for what could possibly happen. I don't ever think anyone should feel guilty that, oh, that happened and I didn't see it coming. Most of the time, you can't see exactly when things will happen anyway. If you're not a large enough company to afford to have someone full-time scanning for you and helping warn you about what might be coming ahead, like a guy sitting on top of the crow's nest in a big old-fashioned sailboat looking on the horizon, if that's not what you're able to do, then you take that down to a level that you can manage and you say, at what point during the day will I make it a habit to take 10 or 15 minutes to scan the most important information givers that pertain to my industry or my service. So you can take those 15 minutes, you can go online, you can scan either the news networks that report on things that are pertinent to your business, or you can look at the local area and see what organizations and businesses are doing there. Um, it all depends on your business and what your business or organization does as to what you will need to look at to scan. But even me, a single person, and you, an individual who work together in a company, even we can do that effectively. It's so much better to have 10 or 15 minutes of scanning every day to take a quick look at what's going on around you than to have nothing at all and more or less having your head in the sand as to what's going on in the world. So could it be a full-time job for almost anybody in any business or organization? Yes, you could use someone full-time. It would be great. But most people at this point in time that we are speaking and working with, they do not have the option to have a full-time person yet. But what they can do is set aside those few minutes a day and scan for themselves, learn what it's like, grow in that skill, teach others to grow in the skill along with them, and then eventually, as they see the fit and the need, they can bring someone on in part-time and then full-time. Um, Scanning is so very important, and you're right, Jeff, it is definitely not just for people who can afford a full-time scanner.
Yeah. And I also want to challenge you on another point where you were saying, I don't think people should feel guilty if they miss something. And if they don't see something that's coming down the road. Um, well, yeah, you can't foresee everything, but if everything, almost everything, catches you by surprise, then that's a problem. And
Right.
it doesn't really matter what size of organization you are. As Robert Greenleaf says, that foresight is the lead that the leader has.
I love that quote. It's so awesome. But I think what comes to mind with that is as a as a leader that I think of myself, and I know a lot of people in this position too. Um, we we have to choose where we'll spend those few minutes every day scanning or being aware. So if we are not able to be aware of every single thing, we have to be able to be okay with that because we can't be 10 people. We're only one person. But what you said was if everything catches you by surprise. So I certainly would not advocate not making an effort to be as well aware and informed as you can be. I want to be that, and I would hope that for everyone else. And it does take It does take some discipline to do that, for sure. But I think the guilt comes in when, especially I think of small business owners who become very fatigued with all of the aspects of the business that they're doing. And one of the first things that goes is the scanning and other items that are back office issues that no one sees but them. And it's entrepreneurial fatigue, and it happens to everyone. So I guess that's why I'm saying don't feel guilty about that, but don't just write it off either. Make sure that you are returning to do the right thing, and take small steps if need be, but take the steps to be aware.
Yeah, and we're spending some time on this because it's really important, I think. And I want to add to that is that scanning doesn't always have to be a formal process. It just means also being aware of what's going on. I mean, when you're reading an article in the paper, just asking yourself, and how would this affect my business? You know, when you're having conversations with people about you know, what's going on in town or what's going on in the state, asking yourself just mentally, and how would this affect my business? You
Right.
know, so it doesn't have to be a formal process. It's just also informally being aware of, making a habit of being aware of what's going on around you and asking the question, and how does this affect my business?
Right. Let me just give you just a brief example of what I do every day, just to let you hear something that's practical and nuts and bolts. When I get up in the morning and I do all the morning things before I walk out the door, I take a quick look at the global headlines, a quick look at the national headlines, and a quick look at the local headlines. That's all, just the headlines. I want to see if there's something that I need to delve further into during the day at some point when I have a break. Okay? Then the last thing I do is I look at my very localized network. And where do I find them? Well, most of them I'll find on Facebook. Some of them you find on LinkedIn. They'll be posting things there about what's happening. And certainly Twitter can be a very broad resource if you have developed who you follow and who follows you. So that's another way to get instant information in real time. You can use those as well. And really any of the social media, Instagram and other things too, Google Plus, all of those things are good to look at and scan briefly with your eyes in the morning to see if there are any headlines or anything that stands out to you. And here's a real big tip. If you are a small business owner in a community that has a pretty strong local economy, or at least active local economy, the places you want to look are your very local newspaper that's close by, and usually they'll have the online presence, and you can scan that for local news that affects your business. And then your local chambers of commerce usually have information that they will pull together or corral for you and email out once a week or so. That's always a really good source to get a concentrated amount of information in one fell swoop. Just make sure when you get the email you read it, and then you'll at least know what's going on that week or those couple of weeks or maybe even that month in your local area. So all of those things are important. But like I said, in the morning before I go out, I'll look at those headlines. Then around noon, I'll pick up something that caught my eye, and I check Facebook 3 times a day. In the morning at noon, I take a break, check Facebook, make some posts for myself there, and then at the end of the day before I leave work, I check again. So basically I'm looking 3 times a day.
Okay, that's good. Well, we better finish up point 9 here.
All right.
So we were talking about active inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you want to encourage people to be positive about inquiring. So here's the wording. We want to model as a leader. or even, it doesn't matter who you are in your organization. You can do this. You can model positive inquisitiveness for your organization, no matter who you are. Positive meaning you're asking questions whose answers will help you get to positive outcomes. Next, you want to estimate the expected life of your decision and do a midlife review. So you think that the decision you make will carry you, let's say, 3 months down the road? Well, in 6 weeks, you need to sit down and have a little bit of a review where you focus uninterruptedly, with no interruptions, on what's been happening and how that's been going to see if you need to make some adjustments. So make sure that you do a midlife review on the expected lifespan of that decision's outcome. And then you need to also think of this, I like this, Jeff, to regard changing your mind as a positive attribute. It's not about being a flip-flopper and saying one thing one day and something else the next. But if you find along the way that you need to change for certain reasons and you know that you need to change, then just be very positive about why you are changing your mind on this issue. New things have come to light, things have changed, circumstances have changed, and now I've changed my mind. It's actually going to be better for us to do it this other way. And then you work at it from that angle. But I think we have to be careful to think, not to think that changing our mind is a negative thing. It would be if all you did was have an opinion and flip-flop around about it. But if you are changing your mind because you need to alter course to make that outcome good, and it is explainable and a good thing, then it is changing your mind is positive. It's not negative.
Yeah, I think you hit on the right thing there when you said it's got to be explainable.
Absolutely.
And one of the best ways to do that is not to do your midlife review in isolation. You need to bring back probably maybe even the entire team that was involved in making the decision before, and getting everybody involved in that midlife review. And when you do that, then they will also have a stake in changing the decision if it needs to be changed as well.
Right.
You want to keep people buying into the whole process along the way.
Right, and sometimes that term buying in, it sounds a little bit salesy or like you're forcing an issue, but all that means is think about it. When you buy something, you make a choice to invest your money. So when you're buying into someone's idea, you're actually saying to them, I believe in this value, so I'll put myself there right along with you. And that's what that means, buying in. Jeff, I just wanted to say the picture that you chose for this slide is very interesting. Caution, changing business conditions ahead. I'd like to change that to the background to the color green, and instead of caution, I'd like to put something up there like, let's have some fun, changing business conditions ahead, or hallelujah, changing business conditions ahead. Sometimes the changes that we have to prepare for are really positive. Like if you get an incredible amount of growth, all of a sudden maybe a product takes off or a service and you have an incredible growth. That's a change that maybe you weren't expecting it to such a degree. So you have to change what you're doing positively. Is it stressful? Yes, because you better get with it soon because you don't want to miss that great ride on that wave of success, but it's so positive. So it's not always that we prepare for inevitably negative things that come. Sometimes they're very positive changes that we have to prepare for.
That is an excellent point, Renee, and it leads us right into step 10, which is staying charged up. And part of doing that, one way to really stay charged up, and not charged up in a cheerleader style of staying charged up, although that may, from time to time play into it. But staying charged up really comes when we connect our activity to our hopes that we share. And we want to continually go back and remind the team, those that were involved in making the decision, those who are affected by the decision, of the whys behind this decision and the changes that have come forth from this decision. We want to keep reminding them that the reason we're doing this is because we have these shared hopes that we want to achieve. And so it roots those changes in a deep aspiration and gives them great meaning that keeps people charged up. So in doing that, you want to tie your activities, the things that you are actually doing, and the results that those activities yield to those shared hopes. It's just as simple as saying, we did this, and this happened, and this is taking us, obviously, to where we want to go. It fulfills these hopes. And then people begin to say, oh, wow, what a great decision. It's actually taking us where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a big part of that is to keep the story of what's happening and the results focused on us, not me. We want to keep it focused on what are we accomplishing together. And not that individuals won't make significant contributions, but we want to keep those contributions focused towards what are we doing together that we couldn't accomplish alone or just as individuals, and how are we together reaching our shared hopes. And then all along the way, we want to celebrate that progress that we're making. Not just when we feel like, okay, we put this decision in play because we wanted to reach these hopes and now we've reached them, and we can have a great celebration. But we want to celebrate the small victories along the way too, the milestones. We came this far. We're this much closer to our goal. So take some time and celebrate that. Celebration keeps the fires burning and keeps us charged up and keeps us hopeful about the future and rewards the progress that we're making. So that wraps up our 10 steps. And so, Renee, do you have any concluding remarks that you would like to make?
I just think it's worth the time to take the time to come to decisions in this kind of a way, because it will give you the foundation you need for living out the results. You can always go back and say, I remember making that decision and why we made that decision. It wasn't a fly-by-night thing. It wasn't just someone's opinion. We weren't railroaded. We made the decision together. We stand together. It's a great feeling, but it's also a great foundation to build on going forward. That's all about collaborative leadership. One thing I did want to say is that I'm sure that some people who have read this book and maybe have listened to this broadcast and others around this on this subject might say, well, that's good, but not all decisions are meant to be made in this collaborative way. There are some, certainly, as leaders and business owners, that we simply will make on our own and hand down. And so what I want to say to that is this, that it is true that just as parents of a 5-year-old, we might not collaborate with that 5-year-old, even though they are very much affected by the outcome. We might not collaborate with that 5-year-old on what is best for them when it comes to something as practical as what to wear outside on a winter day. But I think we have to realize what are the situations that we have chosen to be in ourselves. Are we in a leadership position where we are charged with giving directive orders to someone else to carry out a task? That is quite different from being in a leadership position where you are required to and expected to lead others to think together towards a decision. So I just think we have to know when we are in a decision-making mode, what kind of a decision is that? And I'm sure that you and I will be looking at different kinds of situations for leaders, when what they're in and what kind of decisions they're being asked to lead through, whether it be the kind that we're talking about now, a collaborative style of working together, or whether it be a more directive style. So that being said, I kind of wanted to put it out there that I don't believe that in every single situation that you have to set everybody down at a table and go through something like this. And so, Jeff, that's kind of opening a can of worms, but on the other hand, I just didn't want the notion to be out there that this is the only way that decisions are ever validly made. What do you
Well,
think?
I think that's a great point that you've made, but part of being a great leader is knowing when you have to pull people into a collaborative decision-making process.
Right.
And when that is the appropriate thing to do, what we've offered here over the past 2 Google Hangouts is a great approach to doing that. And having said that, I want to call your attention to Making Great Decisions Part 1, which is also available on our YouTube channel. So if you missed that, go there and you'll get the full discussion on the first 5 steps. Also, if you go to wellspiritconsulting.com and go to our blog, you will find several posts around this topic as well. So feel free to explore those resources as well. So thanks so much for viewing this video, and if you like it, we hope that you'll click like on it and that you will share it and get the word out about it. So until next time, make great decisions and lead well. Bye-bye.